For those just joining, we're going to wait just about another minute and get started right around 10:30. We are going to ask folks, initially the audience, to mute themselves as we when we get started. Okay, I'm showing us at 10:30, and so I'm going to get us started. Good morning, everyone joining us this morning. I want to welcome everybody to this panel. My name is Dave Bergh. I'm Executive Vice President at Cazenovia College, but more importantly, for purposes of today's conversation, I am our college's campus sustainability officer. I want to extend special thanks as we get started to the lead planners of this event, Phil Rose, and here at Cazenovia College, Professor Thad Yorks. We're excited to have a great panel of students for you to hear from this morning. I think they are true examples of individuals making a difference and coming together to effect positive change on their campuses and in their communities. The students here with us today attend Hamilton College, Colgate University, Cazenovia College, and I'm excited to add Cazenovia High School. These are truly the next generation of leaders that we need. I should note that all three colleges represented here today are signatories of the President's climate commitment, indicating their commitment to working toward climate neutrality. Colgate, many of you may be aware, has achieved the distinction of being the first in New York State to achieve this milestone, making it one of the first in the nation to do so. All of the colleges, as well as Caz High School, have working groups and/or student clubs or organizations focused on sustainability efforts. So among other things, today, we're going to hear from students at Hamilton about advocacy efforts, from Colgate about carbon neutrality and community involvement, and from Cazenovia, both the college and the high school, about educational and awareness raising efforts on this topic. I'm going to ask student panelists to introduce themselves by institution and to indicate the organization or club that they are affiliated with. And I'm going to be asking each of them to, in terms of our kickoff, to provide some brief highlights of their recent efforts. And as we proceed later in the hour, we are going to have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions of our panelists. And to do so, I would ask you to direct those via the chat box on your screen. Those questions will then get filtered to me to share with our panelists. We do ask you for audience members to please mute yourselves as part of this. And if you're able to, at least initially, I understand.
All right, folks, this is Thad Yorks calling. I think, I'm not hearing Dave right now, so we might have a temporary glitch. And so folks, the student panelists are gonna share their screen with us and show us some materials that they've put together to help illustrate some of the things they're gonna explain. So we're basically gonna go down through those 4 institutions. So I'm gonna mute myself, and they know what they're doing better than I do. So go right ahead. Oh, it was Maddie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. It's both of us. Okay, awesome. Can everybody see my screen? Awesome. So yeah, to start off, my name is Maddie Lazenby. I am a first year at Hamilton, and I am one of the 3 hub coordinators of Sunrise Movement Hamilton College. And I am probably the only person on this panel who is not in New York State at the moment. So yeah.
My name is Eric. I am also first year at Hamilton College and one of the 3 hub coordinators with Sunrise at Hamilton College. And I'm also in New York.
So yeah, so we're here representing Hamilton College's Hub of the Sunrise Movement, which is a national movement working for climate justice. If you have heard of us, Sunrise Movement as a whole before, we can basically tell you that we are one of the main organizations that is known for putting up the climate strikes, as well as a lot really pushing the Green New Deal in Congress. At Hamilton specifically, we have a lot of campaigns that we are working on for campus sustainability and climate justice action, such as working on moving our carbon neutrality date from 2050 to 2030, as well as getting our college's endowment to be divested from fossil fuels, since we have about $30 million in fossil fuels at the moment. So we want none of our college's money to be supporting fossil fuel industry at all. So we're working to get that done. As well as we really want the college to actually declare a climate emergency, which is something that Vassar College recently did. And if the college were to do that, that would acknowledge the scale of the climate crisis itself and really show that how much it really does matter to the campus community and to the world. So yeah.
Yeah, and then on an off-campus level, we're kind of focused in two different areas, both at the federal level and then also at the state level. And at the federal level, the primary push right now, and has been the primary push for a couple years, is the Green New Deal, which, if you're unfamiliar, is this broad, sweeping plan that's supposed to restructure the entirety of our economy, ranging from the way we do housing with the Green New Deal for Public Housing Act, all the way to the way we might be restoring destroyed marshes in Louisiana. So it is basically this plan to shift our economy from a fossil fuel-based energy system to entirely green energy over the course of 10 years or so, while also prioritizing communities which have traditionally been left behind, and these are referred to as frontline communities. And then on a state level, we have been shifting our efforts recently alongside a statewide coalition known as New York Renews, to push for the Climate and Community Investment Act, which is a bill that is essentially a carbon fee and dividend, meaning that there are going to be polluters who are taxed, and then that money is going to be invested back into frontline communities that need the funding to go and transition themselves, as well as just generally support their communities. So yeah, that's Sunrise Hamilton College.
Yeah, and if you want to be learning more about Sunrise Movement as a whole, you can go to sunrisemovement.org, or you can visit our specific website, sunrisehamilton.org, where you'll see a lot of photos from our past actions, such as our several climate strikes and any other rallies that we have put up on campus. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I am going next, so I'm going to share my screen with you all. Let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, can everyone see? So basically, thank you all for taking the time on your Saturday to tune in over Zoom and celebrate climate action with us. It really means a lot for you to be here. And my name is Christina, and I'm a junior at Colgate studying environmental studies and economics. And I want to share with you 3 ways quickly that I've been involved in climate action on campus. So one thing that I've been involved in is helping support my university's climate commitments on a university level. So specifically, I helped choose the carbon offsets that Colgate would purchase as part of its carbon neutrality. And yes, Colgate is the first university to become carbon neutral in New York State, which is so exciting. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what a carbon offset is, but I'll just go over it really quickly. Basically, it means carbon neutrality means bringing carbon emissions released by the university down to 0. So let's say Colgate starts with 100 tons of carbon before carbon neutrality. So it will do as much energy efficiency in buildings, waste reduction, getting an electric fleet, renewable energy as it can. And then let's say that brought it down to 30 tons, all that effort that it could do. But since a university can't switch entirely to renewable energy overnight, but still wants to have a climate commitment that's significant and demonstrate its leadership to climate action, it will purchase carbon offsets to kind of cancel out those remaining emissions reduce yet. So it will invest in projects to take carbon out of the atmosphere, like renewable energy or tree planting. So in this process, neutrality, it is creating opportunities for students to get involved. So one position that was available was being a student representative on the University Sustainability Council and the Carbon Offset Group, and I was invited to participate in that with other students. So basically, our goal on that committee was to kind of decide what projects did we want to invest in as part of our carbon offsets. Would they be local? Would they have a social justice component? Would they be renewable energy or tree planting? And so the way that I contributed was creating a public workshop for students, staff, community members to learn about what it is for a university to decide to purchase carbon offsets. What are the types of carbon offsets? And then at the end of the workshop, actually participate in this decision-making process by taking a digital survey where they could choose, oh, this is what I value in a carbon offset. I value local, I value social, I value renewable energy. And that feedback and that data was presented to the council and the decision makers and directly informed what carbon offsets we did purchase. And many of them were local and renewable energy. And so the way that I got involved in this was that the council opened up the opportunity for student representatives, and they called on me and other students to serve. So creating opportunities for the youth to serve with administration and adults is so awesome, to have that diverse perspective collaboration. And the second way that I was involved in climate action is volunteering to support my local government's climate action planning. So I got involved in this through taking a course at Colgate called Local Climate Action Planning with an amazing professor, Professor Pattison, who innovated this class that's so unique that basically our homework for the class was to help our local government develop a climate action plan. So the way that this worked was that we helped support the New York State Climate Smart Communities certification for the village and town of Hamilton. So basically, as you can see here, New York State establishes the Climate Smart Communities program to basically set a checklist and a list of guidelines to help municipal governments reduce their emissions and adapt to a changing climate. So governments who are starting from ground zero, they have a list of step-by-step actions they can take, starting with, just pledging to start thinking about this, and then creating an advisory committee, building a website, doing a greenhouse gas inventory, building up and each action creates points. So basically our class and points towards certification, as you can see, like to get certification for bronze, you need this many points. For silver, you need that many points. And so the way that our class was organized is our professors split up the class into different projects. We would each help the village develop points in different ways. And my group was assigned energy benchmarking for public buildings. So helping public buildings measure how much energy they used, and they could use that data to help reduce in the future. And so basically, as you can see on this map, so many communities are already certified or are really working towards that certification. And at the end of this, I'm going to share a link where you can look at your communities and see whether or not it's working towards certification, et cetera. But for instance, the town of Cazenovia is already bronze certified. The city of Albany is bronze certified. The town of Dryden and Tompkins County is bronze certified. And villages and towns are working towards this, like Hamilton, Eaton, Clinton, Fayetteville, Rome City. They're all working towards this. And so the really cool thing that I want to emphasize here is that anyone can develop and help and volunteer with their local government, because I was really shocked to just be in this progression where I had no idea what a climate smart community was. I didn't even know what climate action was before taking the class. And after doing a few readings and hearing Professor Pattison explain it really simply, we were suddenly experts and we could help our local government in that way. So I know that this class is not offered everywhere, but it's really easy to get involved in this type of stuff, even if you're not taking the class. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk about is really briefly just helping local businesses reach their sustainability goals. So I know that we're on limited time, but just really briefly, I, with my friends, just basically talk to business owners and just ask them, what are you doing for sustainability right now? Where do you want to go with sustainability? And just having those initial conversations, looking at what they're doing. We were so surprised to learn that many businesses in Hamilton are already composting and giving that compost to local farmers. As you can see, Hamilton Eatery is doing that in the bottom right corner. Or, offering, if they're a takeout restaurant, offering reusable cups for water in-house if you're dining in, things like that. So if you'd like to learn more about that, feel free to email me and we can discuss that. But overall, thank you so much for listening, and I'll pass it along to the next person.
Thank you, Christina. I'm sorry I lost everybody earlier. Good time for Wi-Fi to crash, it's the best laid plans. So I think we're going to transition to Meghan and Mac from Cass College. If you could introduce yourself and provide some highlights of your work.
Hi, I'm Mac Ritz-Kenny. I'm the president of the environmental club at Cazenovia College, and also have a screen share type thing for you. Can everybody see that? All right, so this is part of the action we do with Environmental Club. This is one of the tree planting things we do every year. We didn't really get to do it this year, obviously, because of all the situations with coronavirus. But this tree planting helps us get carbon out of the atmosphere. Trees recycle carbon, so it's put out by cars and factories and everything like that. Trees take it back in and recycle it. This is at our Renewable Energy Fair. This was a couple of years ago, showing students how to use, and anyone that came along, how wind power, solar, photovoltaic, that sort of thing worked, and raising awareness of alternative uses for energy that's reusable and not harming the environment as much as fossil fuels. These are some recycling bins that we decorated to raise awareness and just make people aware of where you can go to put stuff instead of just throwing it on the ground and making a mess of the environment at CAD. This is another more recent energy fair, different types of experiments. This one looks like it's biofuels, which is another really neat reusable energy. And then this was this year at our Global Climate Festival. We had a big gathering in the Cazenovia College gym where we got a lot of different community members in. And the banner that the people on the right side are holding is something that pretty much everyone that went to the event signed, pledging to sort of try and lessen their impact on the environment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm also with Cazenovia College. I am an environmental biology major, so I work very closely with Dr. Yorks, and as a work study student, I get very quickly involved in various things that the environmental club is doing despite not being officially involved in it. Let me just pull up. There we go. Oh, okay. So my main thing is the Renewable Energy Fair. This is one of the panels that we did talking about mostly local. A lot of it was local businesses talking about what they're doing and how they can help homeowners be more aware of climate change when they're doing different remodelings to their home or purchasing the next car, because we did have some different electric cars on display at the fair. The first one was themed about renewable energy. Obviously, renewable energy and climate change kind of go hand in hand, but we did sort of pick a theme between each one. They also involved the youth science fair at each one. So what this was, kids from the Cazenovia School District doing science projects that were judged by students at the college on a volunteer basis. This is, again, something that had to go online for 2020, like this panel. but a lot of it is based on the education of the general public and especially the students, because if the youth understand the problems that are around them involving climate change at a younger age, they're going to have an easier time understanding it as they get older. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And last but certainly not least, we're excited, as I mentioned, to have representatives as well from Cazenovia High School. So I'll ask Hannora and Emma to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit of what they are up to. And just as a reminder, if in the meantime members of the audience have questions, you can be sending those to the chat box. Those will filter to me, and I'll get those to our panelists after all the presentations are done. So Hannora and Emma.
Hello. So thank you so much for having us here. I'll share my screen. So Hannora and I are sophomores at Cazenovia High School, and sorry, there we go. And so we're very passionate about improving the climate and being environmentally friendly. And one of the ways we've taken action is becoming members of something called Project Cafe.
So CAFE stands for Community Activities for Everyone, and Project Cafe's main goal is to improve our community, and this means improving the environment and our local ecosystems.
Through this club, we work to unite our community as well as help the environment. And to help the environment, we participate in activities such as cleaning up the town for Halloween and some of the listed stuff here.
For many students at our school, we join in an effort to remove shaving cream waste and candy from the sidewalks after Halloween. And we wake up very early the day after Halloween so we can clean up the sidewalks before school begins. We also, of course, participate in the annual Earth Week garbage cleanup around town.
So last year, the Project Cafe members, we came together and were able to clean up all of the trash shown in the image in just an hour and a half. In fact, many people were astonished by how much garbage was cleaned up, and it led them to encourage their friends and family members to reduce their littering.
In addition, Emma and I also worked together to form a new club at Cazenovia High School this past year. This club is Model United Nations. In this club, we've learned about many different issues our planet is facing and how different countries view that issue. After being assigned a country and a topic to research, we write position papers and then attend conferences with members of other high schools to make resolutions for the issue.
So also in Model UN, so through this, we examine how the UN approaches global issues like poverty and refugee camps and how renewable energy is implemented to solve issues. So displayed in this position paper is an example of us addressing the crisis of renewable energy and poverty and refugee camps. And below is an example of a resolution we wrote on the prevalence of microplastics on land and in drinking water.
Other frequent topics we research relating to climate change are how we should respond to monsoons in India that leave thousands without homes, and also how to convince nations to abide by their environmental treaties like the Paris Agreement. This club helps us to better understand how climate change is affecting others around the world and how important it is to stop it.
And in addition to simply learning how change is brought about through the UN, we debate issues covering all facets of climate change to get a more comprehensive understanding of the issues and work in committee to create these kinds of resolutions to the issues from a global standpoint.
Also in Model UN, we learn about how global conferences on climate change are brought together, namely the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and how to make a global impact.
And in all conferences, the chairs and the head of the conference go around and we donate and raise money to charities, which often include environmental organizations.
Although much of the debate is a mock committee without immediate results, with the experience, skills, and knowledge gained from Model UN, students will go out into the world ready to do more than simply talk about the issue, but to tackle them head on with their full range of skills to effectively contribute to pressing issues such as climate change.
And lastly, the third way we've worked to contribute is through a program that Hannora created called Caz Creates, which has a goal of bringing kids around the community together to learn about engineering and how it can be used to help the environment. We hold sessions at the library and bring a guest engineer to each to engage elementary students in problem solving. And from this, they learn about basic engineering topics on how they can help the planet and how to be more energy efficient.
Though we ourselves have much to learn to be able to take part in a full climate initiative like our fellow leaders, we took up the opportunity to work with the generations below us and instill important values in helping the planet and to develop environmentally friendly creative mindsets of solving problems.
And through our sessions, we also recycle and repurpose plastics and environmentally harmful material and encourage biodegradable single-use items.
One of the main topics that we have covered is environmental engineering. And through this, we have done many activities. These include activities on pollution and recycling.
And overall, in our programs, we prioritize eco-friendly values and will continue to learn and grow in the field. So thank you so much for your time, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our presenters. And it's really heartening to hear of all the things going on at Hamilton, at Colgate, and in Cazenovia, both at the college and especially at the high school. So I do have questions that have been coming in from audience members that are filtering through me, and already have several here in the queue. So some of these will just open up to any of our panelists who want to answer them. Some of them are specifically directed to specific presenters. So the first is, I guess, would be directed to any of our college participants. One of our audience members is asking where they could get more details on your college sustainability efforts for public reference and for contacts at the college. For example, names of professors or folks on your campus who they can contact. Any one from Colgate, Hamilton, or Caz want to respond to that?
I'll respond for Caz. But as far as I know, Dr. York's has a lot of the information, but a lot of it is also available on the school's website. I know the like the pages for the Renewable Energy Fair have a lot of the contact information, so I think that'd be a good starting place for looking for who to get in contact with.
I agree, and I can actually follow up on that specific to Cazenovia College. I know we're in the process of updating our college website, and as part of that, a redesign of an upgraded sustainability page. I suspect that the other colleges here too have designated sustainability pages on their website, so that's a good place to start search for that. A question for any of our panelists. Do you see yourselves as pursuing careers in climate crisis work? If so, what do you want to do? We'll open that to any of you.
For me personally, I do not plan on studying environmental studies exactly for my degree at Hamilton, but I do intend on continuing to be an active climate organizer, as well as just for other issues as well. I plan on continuing to organize after I leave college as well. So yeah.
Great. It sounds like, obviously all of our panelists are committed to being active citizens on this front, regardless of career choice. So, but before we move on, again, just any of you who specifically see this as a potential career path?
I definitely do. I've actually been planning on going into some form of climate change research for a while. A lot of what I want to do is how climate change affects endangered species. So my job choices that I've been looking at recently have been a lot of zoo-based, like zoology-based jobs, like working in a zoo's conservation department or educational outreach, because I really do think that education is a big important step to helping the public understand the problem of climate change.
I would also say I'm very interested in a career that advances climate action. Specifically, I'm really interested in waste and policy related to waste. So kind of ways that city level governments or state level governments can create policy that advances something called the circular economy, which I learned about. Maybe some of you know about it, but basically just trying to value materials at all stages of their life cycle, and even sometimes trying to prevent waste before it started. So helping businesses, incorporate more recycled content into their products with policy, or helping create, regulation against single-use plastic, that kind of thing. So I'm really interested in that.
Great.
I would say I would look favorably into pursuing a career in engineering, like mechanical engineering, where I could develop sustainable technologies and like help spread renewable energy. And so like specifically like solar panels and wind turbines to like utilize their unique ability of harnessing energy from like remote areas and helping people across the globe in that way.
I have, I don't want to move on prematurely, so any of you later on, if you have career aspirations, you can feel free to jump in. We do have a lot of questions here, so I'm going to keep moving us forward. This next one is specifically for Emma and Hannora, and it comes with an editorial comment at the beginning, which is that this is incredible. So you get very positive feedback on your presentation. The question is, would you be able to speak to one country that you learned about through Model UN that you felt had an interesting position on climate change action?
In the previous example of our renewable energy and refugee camps, we found that South Korea had an interesting view, because although they haven't been known to support actions like helping refugees or really renewable energy, we found that a lot of their natural resources are imported, which costs a lot for their country, and that renewable energies would economically benefit them a lot. So through things like the IKEA Foundation and the Korea Energy Information Agency, they have the ability to help improve the spread of renewable energy technologies.
Great. Thank you. Hannora, anything you want to add, or?
No, I think she summed it up pretty well. I mean, we do research a lot of countries, and a lot of them are the major countries, so their views are pretty common knowledge.
Great. Well, thank you. I did want to just circle back, let folks know in relation to the first question that had been posed. I did get a note that relevant links from each institution are going to be posted in the YouTube video description for this session, so you'll be able to get more information on each college's and university's work there. The next question, I would say, is open again to any of our panelists, and that is, what do you think is the best way to successfully persuade climate doubters about the reality of human-caused climate change and the importance of working on this issue? So kind of more on the advocacy and awareness front. Any of our panelists want to take a crack at that?
I'd say that there's a number of different types of people who deny the climate crisis or delay response to the climate crisis. And there are people who are just a little skeptical, ranging all the way to outright, denial, like it's not even there. And to be honest, I think that it's more or less a waste of time and resources to try and convince people who are staunchly like, it's not even happening, and this is all a hoax, right? But then the people who are just a little skeptical, there are multiple ways to approach it. One thing that I like to do a lot is focus not just on the climate impacts and the data and everything that is out there that shows like here's the trend over a number of years, but also like what the response looks like. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create a response, not necessarily just prove to everyone that it exists. If you get people to buy into a policy response that adequately affects the climate crisis, then that is what is most effective in fighting the problem that we're trying to solve. So one thing that we do with when we're talking about the Green New Deal is really emphasize how this isn't just about making the transition to green energy, but also creating good jobs and investing in communities and restructuring our economy to be more fair and inclusive of all people. And these are things that are very popular anyway, right? So getting them to buy in there at that level, and then saying like, well, here's how like we're also addressing the climate crisis alongside it. And I think it's very useful to use that intersection of issues to bring people aboard. In addition to just telling them like here are the data trends where like there's a straight line going up, right? Like that should be indicative of a change.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments on this? Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
I would also say, just building onto that point is really significant. And one of my professors said there's a term for that kind of multiple benefit. They call it a co-benefit when an environmental policy also creates like jobs or things that other people who have no interest in the environment would also be down for. So one example is, reducing energy usage saves money, and cutting down the waste that you produce means you pay the landfills less, like you have less to haul, so you pay less. If you package your products with less as a business, you pay less. So there are a lot of ways that these things intersect. And often, one of my professors also said that it doesn't matter, why, when we really come down to the wire, as Eric said, like we need a response, and it doesn't, like if someone's doing it for the wrong reason, like if they're just doing it for the economy, it's fine. Like if we can get them on board for those economic reasons, like that's fine. I'm down to fight for economics. If for me it's environmental, if it's for them it's economics, that's okay. So sometimes speaking in the language of economy and saving money is some way that I've helped with that.
I just want
to also. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We'll
I
go
have,
Megan and then back to Maddie. Go ahead, Megan.
I have actually seen that like a lot of times, if all else fails, talking about the money aspect does tend to convince a lot of people, especially on like a government level. I actually did my my capstone research paper on policies based on climate change. So I did see a lot of that trend of, if all else fails, talk about the dollar signs. And also I have found that if you mention how there's a lot of skeptics that don't believe in climate change because they don't see how it affects them. So if you can figure out a little bit more about them and how they could be affected by climate change in their area, that's an easier way to convince them that it is an actual problem.
Thank you. Maddie, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit about like how I sort of got activated to do climate organizing in the first place, because like was just mentioned and stuff, I don't know a whole lot or previously would not have thought that the climate crisis is going to affect me very personally exactly, but when I was able to learn how it is already affecting other people, that was how I was able to understand that it is an emergency, that there are already people who are living in dangerous conditions that are only made worse because of the climate crisis. So I personally, I really I do view the climate crisis as a big environmental issue. Like, yes, we are going to be losing our forests and our natural landscapes and stuff, but it is also like a humanitarian issue. And I think that when you really specify that, I think that that can do a lot to really activate people to just support the fact that it exists and also to make them do something.
Thank you. I think, then this will segue into the next question. One of the things that's been striking for a lot of folks is the very clear demonstration of human impact on climate that we've seen in the recent weeks during this pandemic in terms of its impact on the environment in mostly positive ways. And I think a lot of folks have seen, images of the clean water in Venice or the clean skies in Los Angeles. And I think, so that's a lead into the next question that we have here from the audience, which, and again, this could be for anybody on the panel. Do you anticipate a change in your approach based on the current short-term effect on emissions caused by the pandemic? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can speak to kind of on the political organizing front. We are now, in a situation where we can no longer do mass demonstrations, rallies, marches, sit-ins, or whatever else. So those are some of our most effective tools in pressuring institutions, whether they be Hamilton or, Congress people, to make change. That's no longer an option. So we're shifting more into this role of the phone calls and letter writing and using social media as a really powerful tool to reach out to people, and having Zoom calls that are pseudo rallies, I guess you could say, things like that. But also in terms of the policy front, we are now in a position where it's very clear that what we have been told about how we can't afford to pay for certain things in terms of radically changing our society are total lies. The federal government was more than able to put out trillions and trillions of dollars to big businesses and to just in general corporations as a result of this crisis. But we are continually told, this money isn't going to be able to go to something like a Green New Deal. So now that this has kind of been put in full display as the blatant lie that it is, we have a lot more leverage in saying, okay, how about you invest that same amount of money into the people of this country and into fighting the climate crisis, which is just as immediate of a threat and even worse, really, in likelihood of causing, mass suffering than the coronavirus. So I think, one thing we're pushing for here is like something called the people's bailout, which is making sure that in the response to the virus, we're getting as much money as possible going to people themselves and communities rather than these large, multinational corporations. And this is all, in anticipation for when we finally do get out of quarantine, we're going to be able to have many more people who we recruited and educated taking part in this effort, and making a lot more progress as soon as we get out.
Additionally, with the fact that emissions have gone down because of it, we have to be very careful in our organizing to not be spreading the message that humanity is the disease, because yes, anthropogenic climate change is caused by humans, but it is not caused largely by the everyday human. It has only been made as bad as it is by big businesses and the fossil fuel industry. So we really need to be careful about our own language in moving forward with that because of it.
Great insights. Any other comments on the pandemic itself and how you see this affecting this work?
I would say there is going to be, as a result of this pandemic, resources in the future going towards preparedness for this. Like, people are going to be concerned about healthcare. Public works departments are going to be tied up with figuring out next steps. Like, this might take attention away from the climate crisis in that way. There's a risk for that. As Eric is saying, like, we need to push for these climate policies even more. And so there are a lot of ways that the pandemic, as I'm sure you guys are thinking about, that might affect businesses. For instance, takeout is probably going to increase. So packaging, the businesses need help maybe with really putting priority on sustainable packaging for their takeout products. And also, local governments, for instance, with the climate smart communities, might need more help from people like you and people like me actually getting these actions completed. So this might be the time, like the perfect time actually, now that everyone's at home, to really just actually maybe call up your local village office and say, what can I do to help you now that I have some time? What can I do with the skills that I have to really help you develop your climate plans? And I'm here to support you. The same thing maybe with businesses, just reaching out to those people who have power in this moment and also just need help moving forward. Everyone is kind of just like in this together.
Your reference to businesses, that's a nice segue actually into the next question. Questioner writes, how can we promote what I call photovoltaic Fridays, where we take Friday to do some project on climate? And the note is like Greta Thunberg, but for businesses, libraries, movie theaters, etc. Any thoughts on that from any of our panelists? It sounds like within each of your organizations, this kind of outreach is already pretty embedded. It maybe is not specific to any day of the week, although that's helpful in terms of building broader awareness. But in terms of the examples you cited, working with community organizations and businesses, doing outreach and educational initiatives with school groups, et cetera, I think obviously a lot of elements of this work are being incorporated into that regularly. So, I think that the idea of a dedicated day a week is helpful in terms of just building awareness and potentially more community buy-in. So a way to kind of frame some of the work that's happening, but obviously this is work that you're all committed to. Any further thoughts on that? And hearing none, I kind of can wrap things up with a final set of questions that is sort of, I'd love to hear from all of our students on this. If we could, we can go right down the line again, and it has to do with, you can answer any element of this that you wish. They sort of overlap, but any challenges that you've faced in your work and your advocacy, kind of lessons learned from that, and then connected to that, then subsequent advice that you would give to other students and groups who are seeking to undertake their own advocacy efforts. So you can consider this like the broad category of lessons learned that might be broadly applicable that you could pass along. So would love to hear from all of you, if we could, on that as sort of maybe a capstone to this conversation. Why don't we start with Hamilton and work our way west again? So I'll look to Eric or Maddie.
Honestly, it's just, there are so many things that we have learned from this about like lessons learned from our organizing. It's hard to like really even just think of like one very quick example and stuff, but I think like I think the biggest thing is like understanding that organizing is not something that is done by one person. It has to take a full team, and it has to have a full group effort in order for it to be done well or just be done effectively. I think that's like one of the things that we have definitely learned this academic year and stuff. Yeah, Eric, do you have anything else to add on to that exactly?
Yeah, I think that one thing I've learned, unfortunately, repeatedly, is that the only thing that we can really trust in this work when we're advocating for institutions and politicians to make change, the only thing we can trust is ourselves. They are very often, and unfortunately, not going to be honest about where they actually stand. We've had like a lot of, situations with our school, for example, where, the person who runs our investment committee on the board of trustees sits on the board of directors for 7 different fossil fuel companies and is then telling us that it's not financially feasible to divest from fossil fuels, right? So like, we are never going to be able to make progress with that person because of their vested interests and our college's vested interests in perpetuating certain systems. And they're going to give out all these justifications that get around what the actual reason is, which at the end of the day is money and their personal benefit, and frankly, greed. And what we can do to change that is by creating a popular movement that says, this is what a majority of people want. We're willing to fight for it, and we're willing to disrupt business as usual until that change actually happens. And that is the only way to do it. And like, this isn't just a lesson from, our organizing, but like looking at the environmental movement for, 30 years at this point, there's been this approach of like working within the system, which I want to be clear, like can and does work in many places, but on a macro level, over the course of like 30 years that people have been pushing for climate action, working in this polite, traditional way hasn't necessarily been effective in significantly reducing emissions. But what has produced, things like the Green New Deal, things like, a lot of the commitments, for example, a school like Middlebury made to divesting from fossil fuels were caused by students sitting in at their administrators' offices and saying, we're not leaving until you do this. And I don't like that it has to come to that, but I think that we see that, civil disobedience, nonviolent direct action, and trusting the power of the movement has been the most effective way of pushing for these macro level changes.
Thanks, Eric. Christina, any comments from your standpoint?
Yeah, I also have learned so much from this. And one of the things that really I've learned the most from is just showing up. So just really that whole Nike attitude of just do it. If you're thinking about going to a town council meeting, or you're thinking about like going to a meeting like this, or just listening to that kind of vaguely interesting webinar or something like that's going on, just like show up. And I always learn so much from those situations, because I might meet someone or hear something that someone has to say that I'm really interested in, and then connect with them afterward or something like that. Or for instance, when we were doing our project with the climate action planning class at Colgate, Professor Pattison said, go to the town council meeting, like go to the village public works meeting. And so we did. We were just students. We just listened in, and we learned so much about what the town is already doing that we didn't even know about, like geothermal energy in the town garage, like all in the town of Hamilton, all these things that the town was actively working toward. And when we went to that meeting, it felt like it really reminded me that, as a resident, even just a temporary resident in Hamilton, these town council members are our community. They are our friends. Like, we are all working towards a common interest of a better town and a better response. So I thought that was really reassuring and awesome. And I would also say, echoing what you were saying, Maddie and Eric, the importance of partnerships, like just none of this can be done alone, and just that idea of reaching out to someone else and saying, hey, do you want to work on this together? And then just having that vulnerable moment where you're just have no idea what you're doing, but you just kind of go step by step and ask other people for more help as you go along. And that is just, it's a very vulnerable process, because, you're having ambition, you're doing something you've never done before, but in the end, it's for something that needs to happen. So just kind of having that confidence is also important.
Great. Thank you. Mac or Meghan, comments from either of you from Cazenovia College regarding lessons learned or challenges you faced, advice you'd give to others?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, it's more so in my private discussions that I've had with people, but the main thing I've learned is you're not going to convince everyone that this is a real thing. Like, one person is not like arguing with them is not going to be enough. Just for whatever reason, they have their beliefs and they're going to stick with them. Usually it's just a matter of how stubborn they are. Like I have part of my family lives in Texas, and so there's a lot of oil business down there, and they don't want to hear anything about how bad that is for the environment or how climate change actually works. So it's just save your energy for other arguments if you see that that's not going anywhere. There's other things you can be putting your energy towards that'll be much more beneficial than trying to convince that one person.
Mac, anything you want to add?
Yeah, something that I've learned is that going off kind of what Christina said, yes, like groups and things like that are really active and important, but it also can be done as an individual as far as like paying attention to your personal impact on the environment. So like, I don't know, if you have a plastic thing, or instead of just throwing it in the garbage when you're done, just rinse it out and put it in the recycling bin. And that it's just like one little step that you can take, and it's super easy. And it's just that little thing that it won't go to the landfill, and it won't become part of the bazillion pound pile of garbage that fills here like that. Right. And there's just so many little things like that that you can do on a daily basis that take pretty much no effort, and they're a big impact when you combine more than one person doing it.
Thank you. I think so. Hannora and Emma will give you from the high school the last word on this advice, things you've learned, things you want to pass on to others.
Okay, so I think one of the most like important things I learned is that you can have like giant dreams and you can like want this to happen, but it's important that to start small originally and build up, having a group of people you trust that support you and that will work together to help you, because you can't do it all on your own and you do need that support. So I definitely think it's just very beneficial to start small and work your way up instead of just jumping into the deep end.
Yeah, I agree. And going off what Hannora said, in kind of in our experience of like creating these clubs and like building like this program from scratch, what we've learned is that like every small thing counts. And so like every hour picking up garbage counts, or every lesson we're teaching a kid counts, because in the long run, all these small things will build up. And like, although it's not at a government level, like if every person, or like if one person could impact like 10 other people and so on, and like I'm sure you've heard this before, like it'll impact like thousands of people. And so I feel like when you're building onto something, like even if you have no clue where you're going, like just small steps in the right direction will eventually lead into something that can make a difference.
Yeah. That's a perfect capper, Emma. Thank you. I think thank you to all of you for the work you're doing. And I think, again, it's very heartening and hopeful for the rest of us here in the audience to hear of the commitment and dedication that of you as college students and high school students have to this work. I think, as Emma says, it can feel like small steps that really add up. And I think today I would include as one of those steps, as I'm looking at the audience today. I won't name names or call anybody out, but I see some village or town officials have joined us as well. So I think this was a nice opportunity, I think, for you to kind of showcase your work and your priorities to folks who are in positions to have to affect change in our communities. So again, I really want to thank Meghan and Mac, Eric and Maddie, Christina, Hannora and Emma. Great to have representation from all of these groups. Thank you again to Phil Rose for helping to coordinate this and initiate this effort, and Thad Yorks, who's the man behind the curtain right now, making all of this work from a technological standpoint. Again, you can, this will be posted on YouTube. It'll have links to information at the particular institutions in terms of efforts ongoing there. And with that, I think we've reached 11:30. I want to thank everybody for your time and participation, and thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.
On behalf of our student group here, we'd like to thank you for putting this together and hosting this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, have a good weekend.
Well, thank you.
All right, take care.